Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
What, do you want to set it up at all?
No, I will, but I just want this first part because I don't want to forget
Okay.
about that. Whatever you just said, it's not.
Well, I was just saying, like, I just think that it's not like we end up in these situations because any one person is meaning to be demeaning or bad or taking your toys and playing with them when you can't. But there's like a cultural agreement. I always think of Don Miguel Ruiz, right? 4 agreements. Like there's just, and not that these are one of the agreements, but like that there is a cultural agreement about there is an expert and then everybody else is listening. I'm the teacher, you're the student, that there is a programming that's been passed down through our school systems and then from our kids should be seen, not heard, parents generation. Like there's a thing that is like a you show up in a space that you pay for and you're sort of expected to listen like a good person. And then you don't really get to have questions. You don't get to challenge authority. You don't get to, there's a lot of things that like, I think what you're noticing now and what I'm noticing now is like, I just don't want to be in that space anymore. And it's not like they are intentionally doing it. That's just sort of the model they're copying and then offering you to buy. Hey, you want to buy this? And you're like, sure, let's see if this has my answer. And you being the amazing questioner you are, keep going to find like, where is the space? I've done that. And I don't think I've bought a program. I don't think I've bought a program for a while now. And it kind of parallels with, I haven't really read a book for a while now. And it's kind of because I'm tired of people telling me shit. I'm like, let me do my thing.
Yeah.
I have a moratorium on learning. No more classes. You may not buy another class. You have a moratorium on books and classes. Shut your ears and just go do the thing you feel led to do.
Yeah. Jody,
you have a moratorium on classes.
You don't even tell me that. I can't. I'm not there yet. I'm not at that level of my awareness yet that I can.
Shut up. You are too. That is such a cop-out.
I'm reading. I'm in the middle of a book right now. That's really good. So I can't say it right now. So,
all right. Well, I just listened to Dare to Lead the other day from Brene Brown. So it's okay to listen to a book. I'm just saying, like, if you're going to read a book, then read it from a different place. Don't read it from the I don't know shit to this person has wisdom. I have wisdom. Yeah. I love how their wisdom is championing my wisdom, not their wisdom is something I never had. That would be different.
Huge distinction. That's really good. So I will set us up. Well, that'll be a clip we'll put at the beginning and then we'll set that up. This is good. Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode number 157 of Circle Up and Get Real. I know. Wow. If you're watching the video of this, you just saw Chris do a wow with his mouth and his fingers. Because Chris, this is your doing right here, right? We're in Circle Up and Get Real because it was born in 2020 with my work by you.
Look at you now. I just love how you keep leading the conversation, Jody. You know, I don't know if sometimes I think on one hand you do recognize that you're leading this conversation. And then other times I think you maybe don't realize that you're leading this conversation, like.
Yeah, I think I do. I think I do more than I don't. Okay. So we're going to have this conversation about a lot of things today. Everybody, if you're listening, get ready, buckle up. I might go in a lot of different places. We're going to get real. We're going to get real. So this is Chris Angell, for those of you who don't know, and Chris is the founder of My Groundswell and a lot of other really cool things. I think when I was first attracted to you before, like as a professional, we have a history a little bit because your wife's aunt and I graduated from college together. So there was this connection before I really knew you. But when I was first introduced to you, I guess, it was about marketing. And your platform was marketing for the rest of us. And I was like, ooh, I need to listen to that because I hate marketing and the funnels of things. And that was really attractive to me. But since then, which has been, I don't know, 25 years, feels lifetimes ago. 3 or 4 years. It hasn't been that long, but that's the really cool thing about making a connection on a soul level with somebody, because it does feel like it's been generations and, lifetimes ago. And that's how it's felt with you, Chris. So welcome to another episode. You've been on many times.
I always love talking to you.
Well, I love
where it's going to go, but
I know. And I love who I become in your listening. That might sound weird to you if you're listening on a podcast, but if you are a podcast listener, you understand the power of podcasts and listening space. I feel that I am heard with you, Chris, in a way that doesn't always happen. And I don't know if you can elaborate on that feeling of listening space.
I mean, I love that distinction. I learned that from Landmark. You know, you and I were, it's so funny. You and I took the Landmark Forum the same year, 2003.
We did.
That's so wild. And we didn't even know each other at the time. So crazy. You and me, our synchronicities. But the idea that who you are in a moment is given by how people listen to you. And example, based on the thing you shared with me from what you're reading, and then I made a post about, you know, in a teacher-student energy, if there, and I show up as the student and the person I paid money to is the quote unquote teacher, if how the person's listening to me is the student, then that's sort of, in some ways, that's how I show up. Now, if I were going to try to exercise my own agency and ask a question because I didn't agree with or understand what the teacher said, and the teacher was listening to me as a student, what they would probably call me is rebellious or an antagonizer or get out of my class because you don't want to be here to learn, or they would make all kinds of judgments and assessments about my question. But if I behave well, and I'm hanging out in the space, then it sort of works, because the listening, I don't know if I said this well, but the listening is, I'm the student. We are all students here to learn from the guru teacher who's teaching me what they know. And that is the listening of the space.
On the other hand, if the listening is, we are all here in this together.
Right.
You know, I'm studying a couple of things right now. One is Outwitting the Devil. And in Outwitting the Devil, which was actually written in 1938, but not published until much, much later, 2012, the first time. The devil, who is one part of a conversation, because you could say devil, angel, you know, there's a lot of different ways to think about that. The devil in this case talks about education, talks about the way, if we wanted to change the way learning happens in the world, we would have the students be the teachers. And that's true with third graders up to, you know, and us.
I mean, to your point about the flip side of what the example I gave, then how teachers would listen to students. The listening of a student would be that the student has something to teach me, the teacher, or the student is a co-creator in the educational experience I create for the student. But the listening is they have wisdom, versus the old school listening is I'm here to teach them. Different listenings. And so how you show up, and I think that's what you're saying about how you feel in my space, is how I relate to you isn't, I'm relating to you like you are a wise human being who has a lived experience that I can learn from, and we are peers. The listening is we're peers, not I'm better than you, you're better than me, you're less than me, I'm less than you, like you're richer than me, I'm richer than you.
That's where I think it goes back to the comparison thing that we're so used to, so conditioned to look at. You know, comparison is the thief of joy. That's so true. Comparison robs an experience of its joy, because I'm never experiencing it. I'm always looking at you. How am I doing? How is you seeing me? What, you know, am I smart enough? Am I good enough? And that's a really inbred conditioning, I think, from our human condition, you know?
I think it's interesting. If you thought like comparison is a listening, you thought like how I listen to everything is through the lens or the filter of comparison. So the listening, if the listening is comparison, then then what comes through is always like, am I better? Am I worse? Am I like where am I in relationship to what is quote unquote right or wrong? And so your listening that way gives you your experience in life.
Yes, politically, economically, spiritually, every way.
Yeah.
Because we don't listen. You've heard it said many times, we don't listen to take something in, we listen to react, or we listen to respond. I'm not really present with you because I'm worried. Like you said, comparing, oh my gosh, what if he says something? I was taught one time when I was learning how to be a platform speaker, that you never, ever, ever take Q&A, because somebody might ask you a question that takes you off the pedestal of being the expert.
Right.
And to me, I was like, well, why wouldn't you want to do that? I mean, but I was just in such a different headspace and people thought I was nuts.
Yeah.
You don't ask those kinds
Well,
of questions.
I mean, this is, I love that for who I think listens to your show, or who we both really enjoy. You know, we just think differently, divergent thinkers about things. And it's so easy to feel like we're the ones who are wrong because nobody else seems to share our divergent thought, like, so we go, maybe I got it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's like, it's not that. It's just we're exploring something new. It's not that we're doing something wrong. It's that we're exploring something new. And you're looking for agreement. Your listening is listening for, does anybody agree? And you should probably shift that, because if you're a divergent thinker, you're just going to have you're going to have a lot of upset in life if all you're ever looking for is validation of your divergent thought, because you're not going to get it.
Well, or you're going to do what I did. And I think probably you did some of your upbringing too. I stopped. I did my best to stop that questioning.
Sure.
I thought this has to be wrong. This has to be wrong. I have to be wrong. The way I'm being has to be wrong. So I'm going to do everything I can to not be who I am, because it's wrong. It's not appreciated. It's not validated. It's not recognized. It's not celebrated. And if what we want as humans is to be gotten, seen, acknowledged, appreciated, validated, valued, why would we keep doing something that doesn't bring us that? Right. Little kids, just think about that. Little kids, that's all they want. Little babies, you want to be celebrated when you fall down, when you're trying to learn how to walk.
I think that's why I like Seth Godin's work on tribes so much. Like, that book is one of my favorite books. I love when he says, people like us do things like this. Yeah. Because that one phrase has all kinds of the things you say we want. Like, we want to be validated, accepted. But if I'm trying to be validated and accepted outside my tribe, in the early and late majority, the bell curve of humanity, which is where most people are not like you listening to this. Most people are not like you. And so, but we're surrounded by, in just proximity to where we live, where we work, we're surrounded by the bell curve of humanity, the masses of humanity who are living in an old way it is. So if you're at all a divergent thinker and you express your voice to those people, they don't get it. But so the trick becomes finding those who think like you or talk like you, and not as a way to exclude others, but as a way to incubate the very questions you're exploring.
Yeah, I remember hearing about echo chambers during, COVID and before that, and how that was a bad thing. But really, echo chambers are good for incubating, like you said. Yeah. I need to, this is a tender idea. I'm not ready to have somebody pick it apart yet. I need somebody to validate it so we can come out of the echo chamber. The danger is when we believe that's all there is. The people who are validating me and continue to validate me cause me to believe that my way is the way. And then there is no divergent thinking at all. And that's where we get into a little bit of trouble, in our world.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I've wrestled with how years ago I was doing some stuff from Tim Kelly. I think he wrote a book called something on purpose. I can't remember what it's called now.
Okay.
And he did a lot of parts work with, like, Carl Jung, doing parts work, asking yourself questions and then listening for the response, journaling what your parts are telling you.
Okay.
And I was asking the question about my purpose. What's my purpose? What's my calling? Those things. And one of the things I got was to stop groupthink. Part of my work is to eliminate groupthink. But I've also wrestled with it because, and I've heard people say, like, well, groupthink is bad. And I agree with that. But the flip side of that is that, and I think when people hear me talk about leading a conversation and find others that want to play in the conversation, and people who agree with the conversation, and people like us do things like this, like, what they jump to is, but groupthink is bad, or what they jump to is, but there's no diversity in that conversation. And I, it's interesting to me because I feel like people are trying to have their evolved conversation and they're trying to bring diversity to it. And the problem is the diversity kills it. Mm-hmm. So it's like, we're trying to have diverse conversations, and we get into equity, we get to inclusion, we get to all kinds of things where it's good to be inclusive and to have equity for things. But if you're trying to bring this fragile thought that hasn't been developed to a bunch of people who shoot it down or are so attached to their narrative that there can't be, we can't think from different places. So I'm like, what is the enemy here in groupthink? I think it's ego, it's attachment to narrative, it's identity, that my identity is so much wrapped up into one thing that there's no room for anybody else's question. This is why people in power don't want you to ask questions, because it's a threat to my narrative.
Right, right. It's reminding me of the conversations I used to have with my mom, not even in person. I had conversations with her in my head once in a while. And she was very religious, strict religious, and she had her way of believing things. And she was so scared I was going to hell because I didn't believe exactly the way she did. And so she would just send me pamphlets on things, this is the way it is. You need to believe like this. And she was literally scared that I was going to hell. And at one point it occurred to me that I was doing the exact same thing to her in my head, because I was saying, you need to be more open-minded. You need to be more, inclusive, more. And we were doing the same thing because we weren't accepting who we are.
Right.
And when I got that, I stopped trying to wish that she were more open-minded or that she was something other than what she was. And that shifted at least the way I showed up in the relationship, because my listening was not defensive.
Right. Well, it's so interesting to me, because I think if it just points to me to the issue that I feel like part of the issue is that if what we wanted was a more equitable society, a group of people who learned how to get along and propped each other up and had a system that worked for everybody, what that would require is a listening. It would require a listening to your very point of this whole conversation so far. It's like that there would be a listening that is that we let me say this way, not even what the listening is, but that we know how to listen. Do you know what I mean? And not listen like paraphrasing, parroting, active listening, none of the buzzword things. But I mean like that the listening that is held for someone is one where they feel like a peer and not a project, where they feel like someone who is gotten, right? Versus someone who needs to be told.
Yeah.
And I think you can go to any sort of these places where in our respective tribes, to use Seth Godin's word, our respective places, we're trying to tell the other tribes how to see us. Well, you're not seeing me right. You need to see me this way. Yeah. And so the listening that's there isn't one of peer to peer. You are peer with me on this path and we're walking each other home. The listening is, you don't understand me, so let me tell you how to understand me.
Yeah. So would it be then that I'm actually developed in your listening of me? Because if I'm coming to you already with my identity in place, intact, and I'm telling you who I am, then I'm not open to the possibility that your listening could create something even broader, bigger in me. That's what happened right now in this right here when I just said that, because maybe I'm going to learn something in our conversation that has me go, I thought I was this. But when Chris, gave me space to say this, or when Chris said this and I heard it differently, I want to change my mind a little bit. That's where the beauty happens, in the listening.
Yeah. That's
when I come in without an agenda, without an identity.
And it's not, and I think maybe it's helpful to think it's not Chris, it's the listening.
Right. Chris is listening. I have to say that because you're who I'm in the conversation with right now. But
I think it helps to think, if you think of from a collective, if you can think of in this moment, it's just you and me.
Yeah.
But if it's one group talking to another group, you can't point to any one person. It's the collective listening. So when we say Black Lives Matter, or we talk Blue Lives Matter, and now what's happening is there's a listening around both those conversations that come from a particular identity, and each side wanting to be heard for and validated for the identity that and the work and the lived experience that they've all had. You're like, well, you're negating my lived experience. Well, no, you're negating my lived experience. And now the listening that is that people are speaking into can't allow for some other thing to show up.
Yeah. It can't. You're right. It's not possible to.
It's not how it's being listened.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How it's being listened is you're telling me I'm wrong. Both sides of that conversation, by the way.
Yeah.
Because Blue Lives Matter was a reaction to Black Lives Matter.
Right.
Well, you're saying that so I'm gonna create my own slogan that's Blue Lives Matter. And now you deal with my narrative.
Yeah.
And as much as and then you can see, it's so funny because you can see the masses start to pick a side. Well, I'm going to go this way. And if you like this one, then that might mean that, and there are some people who I can support both, but it's not even about supporting both. It's, I think to your point, what feels liberating for a human soul, in my opinion, is being seen and gotten. So if you can listen people as a peer on the path of life, figuring it out as we all go, then it shifts their experience of you and themselves. I don't, maybe in your presence, you don't feel like, in my presence, you don't feel like you have to justify yourself to me. Or maybe I make you feel at ease.
So and you and I seriously have not been in person that many times, really.
Right. Yeah.
So we have been able to establish this kind of relationship virtually, which is always interesting to me because I recognize and feel that energy is non-geographic. I do not need to be in your physical proximity in order to be challenged and heard and gotten and listened. It's nice. Don't get me wrong. I prefer it. And if we're using that as an excuse to not get to know anybody, blue, black, purple, green, yellow, then it's really easy to stay in our justification.
Yep. Right. You were talking earlier in it. I can't remember what you were saying, but it reminded me of the reticular activator, which I think you posted about recently, or at least were telling me about in a message. I can't remember. And the the biology that we are meaning making machines. If you have a neocortex, you can't help but make meaning because your prefrontal cortex is a meaning making machine. You're looking for patterns and things so you can understand your world, so you stay safe and you don't get killed. And there's a whole thing that happens that and as much as what would Chucky say about the amount of data that comes in, like 2 million bits of data of whatever, and you're like holding on to 126 bits of data. I mean, there is if how you come into a particular situation is your reticular activator is firing and scanning this conversation for what does my identity recognize, right? What existing stories do I have that are being supported or invalidated in this conversation? And this is the way in which I'm listening to my environment. I'm listening for patterns that validate my identity and ones that invalidate my identity as threats. So I'm like, so what typically, the reason why we get stuck in a karmic loop, I think, as a society, as a people, is that we're not able to turn that off. We're not turning that off. And we're coming into an environment listening for what supports our reticular activator and our identities, rather than being able to step outside of that and get around a different vantage point to listening to others as peers on the path of life and listening to their lived experience.
So what I got from that is it's possible to do that, to take yourself out of the, what would I call that? I guess in NLP, they call it disassociating. If I'm associated with the conversation, I'm in my identity, I'm in my safety, and I'm looking to be safe. But if I am able to disassociate and pull myself out of that, allow awareness to come to me instead of bringing it with me, that's a whole other conversation. And that's the one I feel I have with you more often than not.
Maybe that's where we feel seen. Like, I mean, I'm just playing with this thought, but if how we show up in the world oftentimes is masked, there is a particular suit we put on when we show up with other people. And other people are not usually privy to the deep thoughts and spiritual connections that we typically have with ourselves. and it feels a little risky to let people in on that conversation. So we don't often disassociate ourselves from the mask that gives us security, right? We don't often allow ourselves to be separate from that which keeps us safe in the presence of others. Like it would really be Eckhart Tolle talks about getting above, like looking, like being the observer of the one living your life. You live your life. See if you can see if you can be the one watching you live your life. You say disassociate. That's what I hear in that versus like the clinical conversation of like, it's a bad thing to disassociate.
Oh yeah. No,
as a survival mechanism to trauma. We're saying like in a good way, being able to observe you, the one in your reticular activator system, trying to validate your narrative and stay safe from those trying to invalidate your narrative.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's exactly it. So I think what I was thinking about was it's possible to do that. I'm not saying it's probable. I'm not saying it's simple. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's possible to do that, to take yourself out, to make yourself the observer. And if anybody listening doesn't believe that, try it sometime. Just pretend like you're in a hot air balloon and it's tethered to the ground and you're looking at the person who looks like you. Even imagine that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
And if you can imagine that, then you can do this. You can actually give yourself a different perspective about you. And you can start getting outside that safety and that comfort and that, familiarity that sometimes becomes rut-like. And the only difference between a rut and a grave is the dimension.
Yeah. Right. Well, I think that there's a whole journey attached to that. The minute you start noticing the thoughts you say, I think Eckhart Tolle was saying this one too. Like you can be like, what do you mean there's a voice talking to me? And then you hear the voice, you're like, oh, there is a voice talking for you all the time. And when you can start to notice the voice is a good first step in noticing that there is another you here, that you, the observer, is the one that heard the internal thing say, what voice? Or what are you talking about right now? You're being really crazy. Why are you talking so crazy?
Yeah.
That you saw that is the observer seeing that.
And I think I remember him in the book, him saying A New Earth, I said to myself, have you ever thought that? I said to myself, well, who's I and who's myself? There are two people, two entities in that statement.
Yeah.
Which is which?
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
I was just going to say the safety that we feel in the listening of someone else allows us to explore things we might not know about ourselves either. So it might not even be that we're doing it on purpose. I'm masking and I'm wearing the mask. I might not have wanted to dig in. I might not have ever done that. You got to know there are millions of people walking around living their lives by default. They've never thought about this.
Right. Yeah. Because again, I have an identity. My subconscious goal is to stay alive. The hypnotic rhythm of my life to bring us to the, outwitting the devil from Napoleon Hill. Like the hypnotic rhythm that is set up for me is I'm in a really good rut that keeps me safe. Like this is the way it is. So, and my reticular activator is constantly backing me up on what things do I notice that allow me to survive. And that means keep my identity alive. It is a very disorienting, uncomfortable fork in the road to begin to notice the thoughts that you are having, and to step out of the cultural, familial, generational patterns, programming that you just were born into. You're just born into it, by the way. You didn't have a choice. You're born into it. And the minute you start to take inventory of the thoughts you have, the threats, the thing, what was a threat? What even was a threat? What felt like a threat? And if you could unpack that, why was it a threat? You would see that there was some pattern that challenged the narrative and identity you have about something. Could you step out of that and start to be with a different story, a different thing about that? And I don't even have your answer for that, but that's why it's uncomfortable, because it can lead you down a road that could take some years, especially if you go it alone and you don't have different kinds of coaches who are trained in trauma type or even this type of I would call it a spiritual coaching conversation, you could really be confused for a while because you're going to be frustrated by how you think things should go, and then questioning the story that's being told, and be like, well, what's the right story? And I mean, you just could be, and I can tell you on this side of having gone through much of that, like if what you want is to be the creator of your life and not the reactor to life, then it's the only path you can take. Otherwise, life is one big reaction to all the things your reticular activator is trying to notice to keep you safe.
And I want to just be clear, there's nothing wrong or right or good or bad about any of this. This is just a noticing the path that you and I happen to be on now. I mean, I'm not here to judge other people's experience of their living, their lived experience, right? Because it's not for me to do that. I'm not here to tell people that everyone needs to be X, everyone needs to like the color orange, everyone needs to, walk this way, because that's what we're trying to escape. I don't want to be like the masses. I personally, for me, want to live the way I feel I was created to live. And
Yep.
if people resonate with that, awesome. Which kind of brings us to the conversation about community, Chris, which is one of the platforms that you are really committed to. Do you want to talk a little bit about that community, why that's so important?
I just think it's become, for me, I think I mean, it just came from my own awareness. You were talking about what do you notice about the way you're doing things and what your reticular activator is looking for. I started to notice that I felt like I had to be the one to produce the result. I had to be the one to prove to myself that I can do it. Don't help me. As much as I loved people, I felt burned by people. So I didn't trust people. So I felt I needed to go it alone. I remember being labeled a rebellious spirit. Oh, you're a rebellious spirit. You're questioning things. And I was like, fine, screw you. I'll go, I'll go do it myself. I'll go live my life myself. I don't need you. And I took on this whole thing. Like, I don't need you. That was a really good survival thing for me. I don't need you. I don't need you. It was like defiant and like pound my chest. Watch me. I can be strong for myself. I don't need you. Mm-hmm. But the weird part about that was I love people. And in fact, I'm better with people. But my story did not allow that.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think that's uncommon in our society. I think there's a lot of, we praise and exalt mavericks. We think rebels are cool. And I'm all about Rage Against the Machine, but I also think that there is a, at what cost? Like if you're doing it simply because that's the narrative that you're living in, it's at the cost of the life you really want to live. Then, and I think that's what I started to notice. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to create change, which is what I want my life to be for, I have a whole thing about how the world could really work better. When I look at my options for that, how would I create that change? One, I could be the maverick and be like, I'm going to go lead change. And it falls on my shoulders to pull it off. But that won't cross the chasm in the bell curve of change. You, as an early adopter with an idea for change, if you're trying to go it alone and you don't have enough people who have incubated this thought idea with you, it won't spread. It won't grow. And I realized I need people for my ideas to grow. And so what kind of people? Do I need people who are my yes men and women who are like, yeah, Chris, you have all the right answers? Or do I need people who can step out of their narrative and be just as curious as I am about what's working, what's not working, what else does this look like? Because right now there's a lot of people who are trying to lead change, but they're doing it from a place of, I have the answer and I'm looking for yes men and women who want to agree with me and pay me lots of money to follow me to wherever. And I'm like, I don't want to be the guru on a pedestal. I want to be the peer who's walking each other home with an idea that seems really curious and interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's community, by the way.
I was just going to say,
what I think of. Yeah.
I was just going to say that sounds like community. That you told me early when I first started my course and my platform, I said, I want it to be a circle because I want everybody to do it together. And and I still kind of believe that, but you've showed me that there does need to be a leader because going in a circle is great, but it doesn't go forward. And by, what I say, answering the call in a weird kind of way, answering what feels that I'm put here to listen to, because I don't personally believe it's me, Jody. I believe it's me as a receiver of a message that's greater.
Yeah.
It's purpose,
Steward.
not what's that?
Steward.
Steward. That's a good word.
Steward of something. I'm a steward of something.
Yeah. I'm a catalyst. I'm a not catalyst isn't the word. That's why language is clunky, because it feels like I know what I'm saying, but I don't have a word for it yet. I am a conduit of a higher message. And if I can hear it and just go first and, hold the flashlight that contains the same light that we're guided by. That's what I feel this community is. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think steward's good. And I think it's interesting just to think a lot of, again, to the discomfort of being a divergent thinker and, stepping outside your narrative and identity, you'll put yourself in a place where you don't have language for things. Like, I don't know how to describe this. And it's as uncomfortable for you as it is for other people to listen to, because they're like, I don't get what you're saying. I think you're really crazy. And you're like, crap, maybe I am crazy. And if you have to spend enough time in that liminal space, that space between leaving the identity and the pattern that you were in to finding your clarity and confidence and conviction as a steward for the thing you want to bring the world. That space between can be a year, a decade, 2 decades. It can be some space, but in that space, you're going to go through a lot of time not having language for what it is that you sense and feel.
And the marketing gurus who are trying to sell you a program are going to tell you that's exactly why you need me, because I need you to, I need to help you spread your message so other people can understand it, because we have to speak to people where they are and take them where we know they want to go. And that's a process in itself that I am just tired of trying to figure out.
Well, it's a faulty premise. I mean, it's advice to have to be succinct. Storybrand talks about, if you confuse, you lose. Fine, I get it. But that is assuming the game that you're in is, so if let's go back to those two places. There's the generational societal game that everyone's playing. You're born into it. It's the game everyone plays. Build your resume, make lots of money, have the toys, financial freedom, all the things that people do in their lives because that's what we think we're supposed to do. And on the other side of that, living a life that is of your creation, that is for the world you want to see, that comes with confidence, clarity, and you don't need to justify it to anybody. You are just whole and complete in yourself about it. There's no comparison. There's no listening for how am I compared to somebody else. You're just living your life. And and if you're going to play the game called, I'm going to sell stuff to people in this game over here that's happening, that is just the way the thing we're born into, then fine. Then you can be really succinct with the thing you want to sell them. And you already know the script. You already know the comparison game they're playing. So you can sell to the pain and you can sell to the pleasure, because you know the comparison that they have about pain and pleasure. But the game I'm playing now is finding those who don't want to be in that space anymore. And it's not about having a one-liner. Now it's actually the thing that I'm finding most effective is to put my questions on loudspeaker. And it's not a one-liner. It's actually an entire conversation. And my inroad to other people wanting to be a part of the conversation is my questions. Hey, here's what I noticed. And then I also noticed this. And why do we do it that way? And how about this way? And then people go, wow, I've had some of these same things. But I can't condense that into a one-liner that succinctly says the whole message of the thing I'm trying to do. Well, it's kind of breadcrumbs and splinters into a bigger thing.
Yes. And it's kind of, I hate that this, these two words have gotten so tainted, but it's the me too, right? Me too, in that I'm not alone. I too, I also have felt that way. Maybe we could change it to me also. So it's not the same.
It's a mirror.
Yeah.
It's a mirror, like you hold up a mirror and you go, oh, I see myself in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's validation. The validation we've spoken of. I think people want to feel like, I recognize there's something I recognize about this, and that feels good to me because my normal reticular activator hasn't been looking for those things. But you give me this other thing, and all of a sudden my reticular activator goes, oh, that's a new thing to pay attention to. That's really interesting to me, because and I think that's part of why being able to be the observer of your own life is helpful, because it actually lets you see more than your story normally allows you to see.
Yeah. You have wider vision. When you're doing that and you're describing that, I'm wondering how we actually get to the space of making a new decision about things if our reticular activator is there to keep us safe. Because to me, that would come from a lower awareness. It would be fight, flight, freeze from our instinct, which keeps us alive, which is important. But only in our head, when we have to figure it all out. Isn't there a feeling place somewhere where, I don't know, I don't have language for it, I can't figure it out, but it just feels comfortable, it feels right, it feels like to your point, it can't be wrong. What if we had that opportunity to use all three of those channels to help us make better decisions instead of just relying on one?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I've been playing around with. And I call that the space of discernment, head, heart, gut all together. Because as individuals, as humans, if we're looking for community and we don't yet really know what we're looking for, because we kind of know what we don't like on one of the first steps, I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want to be in this place of imposed learning anymore. So what do I want? I don't know. It doesn't exist. Well, how will I know if I find it, if I don't even really know what I'm looking for? I think to your point about putting your questions on loudspeaker, it's about being okay with being unsure.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, I think that's what keeps coming up for me as you say that is just the the terror of not fitting in. Like, I can have those thoughts, but the minute I go, I wouldn't dare tell anybody these thoughts, or how am I going to do that? I have a job to go to on Monday. I can't show up to my job and not be like checked out. I got to put myself back in the identity that does that job.
Yeah.
Or I got to be back in the identity that does this relationship, or I got to be back in the identity that does, what I mean? Like it's very inconvenient to have these kinds of questions because they take you out of the normal operations of your life.
Yeah.
And that's too threatening for some people, too risky for some people.
Well, it's too risky for everyone, isn't it? I mean, everyone. Because what
it's not. I mean, I've done it. You've done it.
Yeah.
You and I responded to the risk. I mean, maybe for you and I, that's why I call the pressure cooker. Like, at some point, you get deep enough in the pressure cooker where you go, I'm not doing that anymore, and I don't care what it costs. I'm out. I'm doing it different from now on. So everybody has a different threshold, I suppose, for what in the pressure cooker for when they jump out, and maybe some never jump out. But I think, it's interesting because I think about regret, and I would imagine the ones who have regret are the ones who who stayed in the pressure cooker and didn't live the life they felt called to live.
One of my mentors, Lance Secretan, says that everybody gets that moment of clarity within their lifetime, but for most people, it's on their deathbed. When they're like, this is what could have been.
Yeah.
And he'll say, what if there were an opportunity to have these kinds of questions without having to completely give up what you have?
Sure.
In order to maybe take a step in another direction. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be all or nothing at once, does it?
Right. So, it's perfect. So enter community. If you could give your ideas, questions, insecurities, if you could give some of that space to breathe in a conversation and a listening held by others who are having the same kinds of conversations, once a week, even let's just say once a week for 90 minutes, you're in a conversation with others who are exploring these thoughts. And then great, you're done, back to your identity, back to the thing that you're doing. You would give it space and time to incubate into courage, conviction, vision, perspective. You would actually begin to see another way. But if you never incubated the conversation, and all you ever felt was alone and strange and weird for being so different, then you'd get to your deathbed never having incubated a different thought, and you'd be like, what the hell have I done? I had so many different things and I just was too afraid to do them. That's regret. But so you don't have to be at all or nothing. But you could be putting yourself into communities who are asking similar questions and pursuing similar conversations that don't have answers. And the very inquiry is the thing that gives you confidence, conviction, perspective to maybe do something different a year, 2 years, 10 years from now.
Right. And I think until we know different, the way our reticular activating system would have us be is safe. So we would always look for the wrong. What can go wrong in this? So instead of seeing what could go right, a lower awareness would say, I can't have those conversations because they will cause me to go further away from my family or my job or my whatever. What if they wouldn't? What if they actually would help you grow in compassion?
Right.
That's what I've been learning. As I grow in awareness, I grow in compassion.
Wow.
And I think to me, one of the things that becomes way more important than it ever was to me before is kindness, which is why in the political arena, I have a really hard time witnessing any of that because I don't recognize kindness.
Yeah.
And as I grow in compassion, kindness becomes more important to me. And then I believe it's possible to have conversations about politics, about government, about religion, about anything that's taboo in a space that in a listening space that has as one of its foundations kindness.
Right. It just requires you could be a kind person with a very fixed identity. And the minute an opposing thought or ideology comes into your space, you either shut them out and be publicly kind, but quietly stabbing them with, like judgments and whatever, or you could be outwardly spoken about how you don't agree.
Yeah.
And so I think the distinction is back to this whole identity thing. Like, you can have all kinds of people in their tribe being kind. The thing that makes the world work is not diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's not what makes the world work. Because you could have a bunch of people working in a company that have diverse narratives and stories and show up to work and make it look like there's kindness. But if you've been in any HR circles, that the amount of team dysfunction or the listening of comparison undermines what I think you're referring to about kindness, that there's a spirit of harmony, that there's an ability to see the human absent of the narrative that allows us to create something new. And I think most people aren't trying to be creating something new. They're trying to be validated in the thing they see.
Yeah. And I think that's an earlier awareness. I was there. You were there. I was always looking for that. That's a safety. I want to dip my toe outside of this, but I want to be safe in it. Right. And to me, where I live in the Midwest, I'm learning a huge distinction between nice and kind. And so what we're kind of describing is nice, where we're outwardly very nice.
Yeah, sure.
But behind people's backs, we're completely stabbing them. I don't want nice anymore. I don't want nice at all. I want kind and real, because kind says I could be completely wrong about this, but I just need you to know how I'm feeling or what I'm observing or what I'm witnessing. And I will offer you that space. I would love it if you'd offer me that space. But if you're not yet at that place where you can do that, I'm still going to ask a question because I care about you, because I want to be kind to you, as a human being.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we agree. Doesn't mean we have to agree. In fact, we may not even want to co-create anything. We too, in our business or in our, even in our family. If you think about your cousins and your extended family, it may not be something that I truly want to be around, but I can love from a distance.
Well, I think it's an interesting point, because I feel like when I'm just in the ideology of it, it's nice to think, let's be kind to one another, really get one another. But my experience has been, that if I were trying to go into a particular demographic of people who have a particular attachment to a particular identity, the listening does not allow for any other thing than what is wanted to be heard from the demographic. So fine, You can have whatever narrative you want to have. That's fine. I just know for me that for me to make the kind of difference I'm going to make, I don't have all the time. I'm 46. So let's say I had another 50 years. I have 54 years. I'd like to be 100. So let's say I had 54 years. I need to, as ideological it is to let's share space and try to understand one another. I just know that some identities do not want understanding. That's not the game that's being played. The game that's being played is validation, not understanding. And so what I want is to go find those who are willing to, because I don't have all the time. So I just want to find those who I can have the inquiry with and then see how far we get. And I think too many people are trying to make a dent in the bell curve of humanity where you cannot find collaboration because there's no listening for that. That's not what's wanted. What's wanted is I'm right, you're wrong. And I don't have time for that. So
I don't either.
I'm not going to hang out. I'm not going to go to the spaces and the family proximity things that make me have to adjust. I will not play in that space because there's no listening for it.
And that's exactly, I think that's what I was trying to say in a way. I love from a distance. I am in vibrational harmony and, energetic connection with people who vibe at my level or whatever that is. It's science at this point, right? I don't need to convince anybody of anything anymore. I am simply attracting who I am.
Right.
And so in that space, it's not that I'm a jerk and I'm saying you're an asshole because you don't understand things the way I do. And you're not saying that, Chris, at all. But I'm not saying I'm making a judgment about you. You're not ready for my conversation. I'm just saying I'm just going to be me. I'm going to be kind about it. We're not going to vibrationally, energetically, we're not going to mesh, which just means I only get to play in the space of the people who are in my energetic bubble.
I guess I only bring it up because I feel like a lot of people are trying to force that square peg.
Yeah, I
feel like
agree.
People are trying to say like, we need to meet in the middle.
Yeah.
And I get the ethos of it, meet in the middle. Yeah, it's a really good ideology. But when both sides that want to meet in the middle are meeting in the middle because they want their side to be right, then it's just a waste of time. It's just a waste of time.
I agree. And that's politics right now. And I think theoretically, yes, probably the vocal minority, the silent majority is in the middle.
Yeah.
But neither of them has an example of how to be in the middle. So all they hear are the edges. And then they think if they speak at all, they have to speak into the listening of one of those edges. And that's why politics is a terrible example of what we're talking about. Community.
Yeah. Well, and I think, again, this, if I thought about how does change really happen for the thing that people say, I think that people really, their heart is right about saying we need change. So we need to meet in the middle. I think that's think what they're saying. I think that's right. The idea that we could come together is the right idea. I think the way people are trying to do it is not effective. And I think the reason I love community is that if in a community we could play together in a way that we feel what it feels like to be heard and gotten as a human on a similar path that has questions, and those questions are okay. Like what we do is in our smaller communities, not communities like where your house is, but in a tribal community where people share the perspectives you have, and you learn to inquire together, and you learn to discourse together, you learn to talk and share and be transparent and vulnerable. And in the learning of what that muscle memory feels like, picture thousands of communities this way that are learning what it feels like in the muscle memory of being able to be vulnerable and transparent with one another. Then in those communities could actually begin to talk to each other. And as they talk to each other, now it starts to trickle into some of the systems of things, right? Like our systems are built from our people. So if our people are not used to being vulnerable, then our systems will have no space for vulnerability. So it's like we're a generation or two away from the thing we say we want, but you can't force a square peg in a round hole right now because the muscle memory is justifying my narrative, not learning how to be vulnerable and transparent with others around me.
Yeah. So the dipping a toe into a whole new way of being will be safer in small groups, in small communities. Right. And so that brings us to what you're up to. Do you want to just go into what you're creating and maybe how people might be able to find you if they're interested in more information about that.
Yeah. Well, my vision for Groundswell communities is to have 1 million members of conscious communities like this, having these kinds of conversations. And these communities, at least in my vision, are specifically to small business people or business people, because I think small business will change the world. I think business people have a vested interest in broadcasting a message. I think if you are not a business person, unless you're an author or a public speaker, but then you're a business, but you don't have as much of a vested interest to lead a conversation in the world. So if you're a conscious business and you're broadcasting a message, and that message is a conscious message, you're inviting people into something more than what you sell. This is how it trickles out. So picture 1 million members of conscious communities who are in business, and they're meeting together to talk about the questions they have in their industry. How do they serve people better? Maybe some of the spiritual insights, or finding language for the things that they are trying to understand about their world that they can't find in the way it was for them, like in the old game they were playing. That's my vision. It could take a lifetime for me, the next 54 years, to finally get to 1 million members of people having these conversations. But I think this is what changes the world, is people learning how to have the muscle memory of being transparent and vulnerable with one another. In order to make that happen, you'd have to do it in an environment where the listening was gracious, humble, accepting, non-judgmental, like that people would feel safe enough to have the real conversations they want to have. And so, yeah, I mean, I suppose if you're in business and you feel like you want to be either in a community like that, we might have a community that you would fit in, or you feel like I want to lead a community like that, then that's another option to talk about. Like, what is your industry? What's your heart? What vision do you see? And that might be worth a conversation. But
so if in traditional ways, we go back to the way it's been, there's competition if they're in the same industry. How do you reconcile having a community of, I don't know, medical professionals, or a community of bankers, or a community of real estate agents who are not in competition with each other?
Yeah. Well, the communities aren't about selling. So it's not about being in this conversation of, let's say I have a real estate agent community called Repurpose. And the whole point of that, and the whole premise of that community, is that when agents are actively building their important work in the world, like their social impact, the world will change. That's not about how many homes you sell. That's about you being as a real estate agent, being in a community and going, what is my social impact here? And how could I use my business as a lever, a staging point for that impact? That's, you could give me 10 agents, 20 agents in Seattle. Let's just say I'm in Spokane, but in Seattle, west side of the state. In Seattle, give me 20 agents in Seattle, and all of them come to the conversation with, this is my social impact. There's no competition there's only collaboration. In fact, maybe that agent's social impact and that agent's social impact have some real synergies to them. I don't think, let's stick with the bell curve for a minute. The whole thing about a just cause, if you read Simon Sinek's books, The Infinite Game, the whole thing about a just cause is you never get there. I'm trying to picture a world where all 1 million National Association of Realtors members would all be this evolved in their thought process about using their business as the lever for social impact. I don't know that will ever happen, but give me 10 in every metropolitan area. 10 out of what? Like Spokane probably has, at the height of a market, probably has 2,400 agents. Give me 10 in Spokane. Give me 10 in Seattle. Give me 10 in Fargo. Give me 10 that are saying, I want to go into this community and make social change. And we change the world because we change the conversation.
Yeah. There you have it. It's that simple and that complicated, because if you're coming from an old paradigm, it will seem unrealistic, but that's kind of the idea.
And you can see too that it wouldn't work if what you brought to the conversation was competition. Like, how do I do this so I can beat other agents? You're like, that's not the game we're playing. And people who have that mindset don't even resonate with this conversation anyway. They're like, this sounds dumb. This is too, airy fairy. This is too,
it's a vibrational mismatch.
Vibrational mismatch. Yeah, right.
That's all it is. So if people wanted to get a hold of you, Chris, and talk more about this, or they have a proposal for you, or they want just to talk to you, how would they do that? What's the best way to find you?
Well, I mean, the best way is through Facebook, really. Okay. My profile, and just go message me on Facebook. My facebook.com/Chris.Angell with 2 L's. I mean, it's just, that would be the best way to do it.
Sounds good.
I'm not a big email guy. I don't give my email out because then people spam me with stuff. It's not like you need to go to my website to check that stuff out. If this is interesting to you, then it's probably just where the conversation human to human,
That's awesome. You'll find Chris if you're looking for him, but don't look for the CRISS.
Chris Angell Mind Freak.
Yeah, he is kind of a mind freak. You are kind of a mind freak, but not in the same way.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. Just Chris.Angell.
Awesome. Anything else you want to say, Chris? Anything else you want to add before we end this?
No, I think we're good.
Chris and I talk like this a lot, and we probably will continue to talk like this a lot for a long time. So this is just one of many conversations that I thank you all for being part of. I hope that you witnessed a dialogue here so that you could see how it's possible to come to any interaction without an agenda. We really didn't have an agenda.
I'd love to, I don't know where you're going to post this, but I'd love to hear people's thoughts, any thoughts that were spurred. That would be interesting. I mean, that's an exercise in being vulnerable with what you heard and sharing it back with others instead of keeping it to yourself. Like, that's how conversation unfolds, right? As you say, this is what I heard. And then somebody else said, this is what I heard, but you'd have to feel safe to do that. And this is the problem in society, is we don't feel safe to say what we hear and to share what reflections or prompts or sparks we get. And so we keep it to ourselves and we think we're alone.
You're not alone.
I dare you to step out and begin to share something that you see and see who resonates with what you say. And now it's not just you.
And we'll be there to support you. We both will be.
Yeah.
So if you comment on anything you see on Chris's page or mine or anywhere, let's start there. Chris or me, we will support you. We will respond to you. We will prove to you that you're not alone. And I love that challenge. I'll take that challenge, Chris. So anybody who hears something that spurred something in you, be vulnerable, step out, share what you're experiencing, what you're hearing, what you're listening. And
with safe people. We
are safe people.
Jody and I are safe. So you can do that with us.
So you got 2 right here. So everybody, thanks so much for listening. Jody. Thanks for being with me, Chris. And as always, everybody, go get real. Talk to you again. Okay, stop recording. Okay.
Yay.